Everyone, meet the woman who couldn't give me a child.
Wait, who are those children?
What is this?
You invited me. So I came, with everything you said I could never have.
That's not possible.
I didn't come alone.
Florence did not choose this marriage. Love had nothing to do with it. Her father and Felix's father were old friends with old debt between them, and they had shaken hands over her future before she even understood what was being decided. By the time she was old enough to say no, her own father was lying in a hospital bed with tubes in his arms, his eyes wet with something she had never seen in him before: fear. He reached for her wrist and held it with fingers too weak to hurt. Her father, barely a whisper: "Please, honor this. For me. Just honor it." What do you say to a dying man who is begging you? Florence said nothing. She squeezed his hand, went home, and packed her bags. That was how she walked into the Adeyemi household, quietly, without fanfare, with a smile she had practiced in the mirror because she knew nobody there was going to offer her one. She was right. From the very first morning, Mrs. Adeyemi, Miss Felix's mother, looked at Florence the way someone looks at a wrong item delivered to their doorstep, annoyed, baffled, already composing the complaint. She never spoke to Florence directly when she could help it. She spoke about her instead, loudly to whoever was nearby. Mrs. Adeyemi to no one in particular. "I still don't understand what Emeka was thinking. This one, with this face, my son deserves better." Better. That word became the furniture of Florence's daily life. It was in every room, every meal, every glance that slid past her as though she were part of the wallpaper. Felix himself was not cruel in the way people imagine cruelty. He did not shout. He did not raise his hand. He simply looked through her, the way you look through glass at something more interesting on the other side. He had married her out of respect for his father and nothing more. And he wore that duty the way a man wears a tie he hates: tight, visible, and suffocating. Florence cleaned. She cooked. She ironed shirts that were never thanked for being ironed. She answered the gate, served guests who did not learn her name, and faded into the background of a life that was technically hers. She endured it all with a steadiness that people sometimes mistook for weakness. It was not weakness. It was a promise she had made to a dying man, and Florence was not the kind of woman who broke promises. 6 months into the marriage, they visited a clinic. The results came out a week later, and Mrs. Adeyemi carried the paper into the sitting room as though it were a trophy. "Mrs. Adeyemi, I knew it. I always knew. She is barren, Felix, completely barren. I told you this woman was a mistake from the very beginning." What Florence did not know, what she could not have imagined, because that kind of deliberate cruelty requires a particular coldness of heart, was that the paper was a lie. Mrs. Adeyemi had bribed someone at the clinic and swapped Florence's real results with another woman's file. The truth, sitting quietly in a folder no one showed Florence, said she was perfectly fine. But Florence never saw the truth. She only saw her husband's face, cold, unsurprised, as he read the forged paper and then looked at her as though she had finally confirmed something he had always suspected. He never came to her again after that night. She became a body in the house, present, breathing, invisible. Every night she would sit by the window and remind herself of her father's hand around her wrist. The weight of it, the desperation in it. She had promised him, and she would hold that promise even if it cost her everything, which slowly and steadily it was doing. Her name was Tara. She arrived on a Tuesday in a yellow dress with luggage that Felix carried himself, something he had never done for Florence in all their months of marriage. Tara was the kind of beautiful that announces itself before you fully see it, all confidence and perfume and the easy laugh of a woman who has never once been made to feel small. Felix introduced her to the house staff, not to Florence. There was no introduction for Florence because in that moment, Florence understood that no introduction was necessary. Tara already knew who Florence was, and she had already decided what Florence was worth. Within a week, Tara was in the master bedroom. Florence was asked to move her things to the far end of the corridor because the message was in every rearranged ornament, every redirected glance, every order that now came from a different mouth. The staff began looking to Tara first. The kitchen began cooking what Tara preferred. The house began breathing around Tara the way houses do when they recognize who is truly in charge. Tara was not quiet about her victory. She had no reason to be quiet. Nobody in that household had the authority to ask her to keep anything down. Tara, smiling at her phone, not even looking up. Florence, sweetheart, you missed a spot near the tap in the guest bathroom. Be a dear and sort it out. Florence sorted it out. Then came the Thursday that broke everything. The gate man, the cook, both drivers, the house girl, all present in the main hallway when Tara called Florence for something. Florence had brought the wrong thing, or brought the right thing too slowly, or simply had the misfortune of being in Tara's line of vision at a moment when Tara felt like drawing blood. The reason stopped mattering the instant the slap landed. It came fast, the way real slaps always do, not like in films where everything pauses and someone draws breath dramatically. One moment, Florence was standing there. The next, her face was turned sideways, her cheek burning, the hallway suddenly very, very quiet. Tara, addressing the room like a courtroom. You can't give him a child. You can't keep a man's interest. What exactly are you doing in this house? What is your purpose here? Florence turned slowly and looked at her husband. Felix was leaning against the far wall, arms folded, eyes on his phone. He did not look up. He did not speak. He did not move a single muscle in her defense. That silence, that precise, deliberate, cowardly silence did something to Florence that months of insults and cold nights and forged medical papers had not managed to do. It did not break her. It untied something inside her, a knot she had been holding tight for a very long time simply let go. She went to her room. She packed one bag. Not everything, just what had been hers before the marriage. She walked past the living room where Tara was laughing at something on television, past the kitchen that smelled of the stew she had been making, past the gate she had stood behind for months like something that needed to be contained. She did not slam the door. She closed it the way you close the door of a room you already know you are never going back to. Gently, finally. No tears, no goodbye, no scene. She had given that house enough of herself. She was not going to give it her exit too. She slept on her cousin's couch for 2 weeks. Then she found a job, the only one offered to her, cleaning offices at night for a facilities company. She took it without complaint. She had been cleaning someone else's house for months. At least now she was being paid for it. She came in each night, tied her hair back, put on the blue uniform and worked. She was thorough. She was quiet. She never left a surface half done. The building she cleaned most often was a 6-story office tower near the business district, the kind of place that hummed with purpose during the day and went completely still by 8. She liked the stillness. She had learnt over the past year to be comfortable in silence. One evening, a man was still at his desk when she arrived to clean his office. He startled when she knocked, then waved her in with an apology for working late. He watched her as she worked, not intrusively, just noticing, the way a person notices when something is being done with quiet, unhurried care. His name was Mr. Okonkwo. He owned the building and, as it turned out, several other things besides, though you would never have guessed it from looking at him. He wore his wealth the way old trees wear their age. It was simply part of him, not something he felt the need to show anyone. He had never married. 62 years old and never married, not for lack of trying. He had tried, many times, with women far more conventionally striking than Florence, but something was always absent. Character, he would say, when he was being honest with himself. The quiet, unperformative kind that doesn't need an audience to exist. He began leaving small things outside his office before she arrived. A cup of tea, a packet of biscuits. Then one evening, he simply asked if she would like to sit and talk for a few minutes before she finished her rounds. She almost said no. Then she sat down. They talked for an hour that first night, and the next, and the one after that. 6 months later, quietly, and without any fuss, because neither of them needed fuss, Florence became Mrs. Okonkwo. She found out at the clinic, the private one her husband insisted on, where everything was thorough and unhurried, that she was pregnant. The doctor delivered the news calmly, professionally, then went very still and looked at the scan again. Mrs. Okonkwo, I need you to look at this screen carefully. Do you see these? 1, 2, 3, 4. You are carrying quadruplets. Florence stared at the monitor for a long time without speaking. 4. She had been told, she had believed, had carried the weight of believing that she could carry more. She was about to carry 4. The second discovery came during a full medical history review. The specialist frowned at her old records for a long moment, then looked up at her with an expression that sat somewhere between professional discomfort and outright outrage. These previous results, the ones that declared you infertile, they don't match your actual biology in any way. There is nothing wrong with you. There has never been anything wrong with you. These results were falsified. Someone switched them. Florence sat very still. Then she nodded once and said, "Thank you, doctor." She did not cry. She had already given her tears to things far less deserving of them. She simply held the information, calm, precise, filed away, and went home to her husband, who held both her hands in his and told her she was going to be a wonderful mother. She believed him entirely. The pregnancy was difficult in the way that carrying 4 lives at once will always be difficult, but she carried them all to term. 2 boys, 2 girls, delivered safely and loudly into a world that had no idea what was coming. She raised them in a house full of laughter and books and the specific chaos that only small children can create. She raised them to know their own worth early, before the world had any opportunity to tell them otherwise. And somewhere in those 2 years of early mornings and bedtime stories, and scraped knees and small warm hands reaching for hers, Florence herself became someone she had not known she could be. The change was not loud. It lived behind her eyes, a stillness where fear used to live, a certainty where doubt had made its home for far too long. The call came on a Wednesday morning, 2 years after she had closed that gate behind her. She almost did not pick up, but the digit had stayed somewhere in the back of her memory the way certain bad smells do, faint, recognizable, and unwelcome. She picked up on the 4th ring. Felix, smooth and deliberate. "Florence, it's been a while. Tara and Guy are having a party for the twins. They're turning 1. I thought you should come. See what a real family looks like." She heard him breathing on the other end, waiting for the wound to open. She thought about it for 3 seconds. Then something quiet and unhurried turned over in her chest, like a key finding a lock it was made for. Florence, warm, unbothered. "Of course. Send me the address." She hung up and looked out through the window at her 4 children in the garden, running, arguing, someone sitting on someone, the beautiful, ordinary chaos of it all. And she smiled to herself. He thought he was inviting her to a humiliation. He thought she was still the woman who moved her belongings to the far corridor without being asked, who cleaned spots near taps when she was told to, who stood very still while her face burned and her husband looked at his phone. He had absolutely no idea who he had just invited to his party. The venue was grand in the particular way of people who need everyone present to know they have arrived. Caterers moved in white uniforms, a live band played near a fountain. The guest list was made up of exactly the kind of people whose opinions Felix and his mother had always treated like oxygen. Business people, old family connections, socialites who knew everyone and forgot no one. Mrs. Adeyemi stood near the entrance with a glass of wine and the expression of a woman who owns whatever room she is standing in. Tara moved between guests with the ease of someone who had settled fully into her position, the twins balanced on her hip, victory written plainly across her face. Then the gate opened. Florence walked in first. She wore cream and gold, not because she had planned a statement, but because those were simply her colors now, and she wore them the way she wore everything these days, like they had always been hers. Her posture was easy. Her face was calm. She moved through the entrance the way a woman moves when she has absolutely nothing left to prove and a great deal left to enjoy. The murmuring started before she had taken 5 steps. People who remembered her from the old days looked twice. People who had never met her looked once and kept looking, trying to place what it was about her that commanded the room without appearing to try. And then, 4 paces behind her, 4 children walked through the gate. 2 small boys and 2 small girls, dressed in white, holding hands in pairs the way she had taught them, their faces open and bright and entirely unaware that they were in the process of dismantling an entire courtyard full of assumptions about their mother. The party slowed. Not all at once, but like a clock losing its battery. Conversation dropped by degrees. Glasses paused halfway to mouths. The band continued playing near the fountain because nobody had told them to stop. Felix saw her. His face arranged itself into the practiced smile he had prepared, the pitying, superior smile of a man who has invited someone to witness his victory. Then his eyes moved to the children. His smile stopped moving. He stood absolutely still, and in that stillness he did something Florence had never once seen him do in all their time together. He looked at her, fully, without his eyes sliding away to something more interesting, like she had finally, after all this time, become visible to him. It was too late for that to matter. Mrs. Adeyemi crossed the courtyard toward her with that fast, aggressive stride Florence knew from 100 mornings she would rather forget. Mrs. Adeyemi, low, tight. What is the meaning of this? Whose children are these? What exactly are you doing here? Florence looked at her, the way you look at something that used to frighten you and no longer does. Florence, quiet and clear. They are mine, all 4 of them. Born healthy because I was never barren, Mrs. Adeyemi. You knew that. You paid someone at that clinic to swap my result with another woman's file. I have the original report, dated, signed, and verified. My fertility was never in question. What was in question was whether anyone in this family had the decency to let me find that out. The courtyard went very quiet. The band took their break. Florence turned to Felix. Her eyes were not angry. Anger was too generous a thing to spend on him now. Florence, you didn't lose me because I was barren. You lost me because you were blind. Your father wasn't blind. He saw what I was worth before I fully did myself. That's why he chose me for you, Felix. Not from sentiment, from strategy. Wilfred and Sons was never your father's company alone. It was built on my father's capital, his land, his name. The legal merger was always supposed to happen through our marriage. Staying married to you would have transferred everything to your family. Your mother thought she was removing a burden from this house. What she actually did was cut the rope that was tied to your inheritance. Not a sound from the guests. Felix's jaw walked without producing words. He turned to his mother. Mrs. Adeyemi had gone the color of cold ash. She set her wineglass down on the nearest surface, a precise, quiet little click, and walked inside. Nobody followed. Nobody quite knew what to say to her. Then the far gate opened again. A young man came in, rough around the edges in the way of someone who had been living hard and had recently decided he had nothing left to lose. He walked straight past the guests without looking at them and stopped directly in front of Tamara. His eyes carried the specific, focused anger of a man who has sent a message, been ignored, and is done being patient about it. Young man, loud, unbothered. Tamara, you want to say it, or should I? Because I sent you that message 2 weeks ago and you left it unread. I don't do well with being left unread. Those twins on your hip, they are mine. I am their father. Felix never knew. That was the arrangement. You told me you would handle me financially. You handled nothing. Someone in the back of the crowd made a sound, the involuntary kind. Tamara's voice left her completely. She moved her mouth and nothing came out.
Felix turned slowly and looked at the twins. Really looked at them, the way he had not done in the distracted, self-satisfied months since they were born. Whatever he saw in that long look rearranged something behind his eyes. The man who had called Florence ugly. The man who had looked at his phone while another woman's hand connected with his wife's face. The man who had carried Tara's luggage and never once carried Florence's grief. He stood in the middle of his grand party and watched his entire constructed life come quietly apart at every seam. The guests were already leaning toward each other. The story was already moving through the courtyard like weather. Florence did not make a speech. There was nothing left to say that had not already been said or shown or understood by every single person in that space. She crouched down to the level of her children. She straightened the collar on one of the boys. She whispered something close to the smallest girl's ear, and whatever it was made all four of them laugh. That specific, unguarded, unself-conscious laughter that only small children produce. Mrs. Adeyemi removed her headgear and sat on the floor, crying. Then she stood, took the hands of the two nearest to her, and walked toward the gate. She did not look back at Felix, who was still standing in the center of the courtyard like a man who had forgotten which way to walk. She did not look at Tara, sitting on a garden chair now, crying quietly with the twins confused beside her. She did not look at the guests who would be talking about this evening for years. She did not look at any of it. She walked out through the gate and into the late afternoon, four small people beside her, the sun doing what it always does without being asked. She had walked into that marriage quietly, she had endured it quietly, and she left it quietly. And she walked away from its ruins in exactly the same way, without noise, without ceremony, with her head level and her hands full of everything that actually mattered. He called her ugly, he called her barren, he called her nothing, and he will spend the rest of his life sitting with the knowledge that the greatest thing that ever walked through his gate was a woman he never once bothered to truly see. Thank you for listening and watching. Subscribe to this channel for more stories like this. Have a great day.